We're here with another week of Indie Attack. I am Woody.
And I am Kelson.
And this week, we are going to be taking a look at a game jam that happened towards the end of last year, but we just kind of never got around to covering it, and that is the Speccy Jam. Specifically, the Speccy Jam is referring to the ZX Spectrum, a computer that was, released back in England in the early 80s. And it's kind of got a funky style compared to a lot of the consoles that generation and PCs of that generation. The Atari and stuff doesn't necessarily have a unique visual style to it, but, you get stuff like the Vectrex and then the ZX Spectrum that have, really weird color palettes and stuff. And it's kind of this weird retro nostalgic thing that a lot of people in the U.S., which I'm guessing is where most of the people who watch this channel are.
Yeah. Although we are global.
We are global. There's a dude in Japan.
Hey, konnichiwa.
But the ZX Spectrum was only released in England. I think it might have had a release here, but one of the funky things about it has a very limited sound card and sound abilities. It has a really limited color palette. What was it, 15 colors? Yeah. And it's their colors that are a little they're not subtle colors.
No.
Yeah, they're not really the colors you would expect something to have in limited use.
It's like hypercolor.
They're all really, really bright and vibrant.
So you can actually have a lot of... It's a very specific aesthetic that actually has a surprising amount of depth, and I think we sort of saw a lot of variation in this week of games that we played to back that up.
Yeah, and even though I don't personally really particularly have any nostalgia for the ZX Spectrum or anything, I really quite like this art style.
Yeah.
When I've seen it now, and I think you can kind of do some fun things with it.
Earlier on in our Loco Molito week, the game L'Abbaye de Mortis, he was inspired by the ZX Spectrum, and we both were really drawn to that, and we were intrigued by it. And I think it's a really it's very a distinct aesthetic, that is cool, man. It's weird because neither of us have personal experience. We're younger than the ZX Spectrum came out 6 years before I existed, likewise to Woody. And at the same time, though, I have this interesting sense of satisfying nostalgia. It's like a nostalgia for something that I didn't experience.
Well, and it's a funny thing, too, because I don't really have a lot of nostalgia for other stuff of that era.
Yeah, I don't
have any nostalgia for Atari or anything, but even seeing this old kind of ZX Spectrum stuff, I kind of have that same nostalgic feeling, even though I wouldn't really call it nostalgia.
Right. Which is fun, man.
But anyway...
Yes.
So for our first game, we were taking a look at Bug-Eyed Blob Things by...
Boris Van Schooten? At Boris V. Schooten? On Twitter.
Twitters.
Yes.
And this game is... it's a little similar to EFMB.
Yes, which we played. Yes.
This is a kind of randomly generated little arcade-esque thing.
Yeah,
you play
sort
as
of
this
platforming
monster blob, and you have to platform through these areas and collect these little glowing doodle-wikis.
Right.
And while you do that, you must avoid monsters.
Yes. Simple enough.
After you've collected all of them, you will gain a bullet ability that, shoots out of your eyeballs. Maybe it's not a bullet, it's some kind of an attack. And then you need to kill all the monsters.
Right.
And then you move on to the next stage.
It's almost like if you played Binding of Isaac, that sort of a thing, the way that you shoot, but it's in this, it's all 2D. And the blobs, as you go, there's 10 levels altogether, and as you progress, the blob monsters that you face... You become more intricate. They get different patterns. There's a level that's sort of like Snake-esque, where they're slithering around.
They fall down from the top of the screen and sort of flow down. And have auto movement. There's some where they just float around independently of platformers. Later on, you kind of fight these big, giant octopus monsters that you hit by hitting the eyeballs on the end of their tentacles. And all in all, it's a really complex way to add depth to that. And you fight a lot of different monsters throughout this.
Yeah.
And more so than that, too, is there's this funny little thing where the platform placement is actually random in each level. And it's done in a way that I really, really like.
Definitely, yeah. It's big ups for just doing it that way, because it actually adds a lot of replayability to the game.
Yeah. Well, it makes it so that even though you have a similar strategy each time you go into a level, because you're fighting the same monsters, you have a different kind of concern of how you play. of how you need to jump along the platformers. Like, there was a level I was playing at one point where there was a giant row of platformers along the side of the screen, and I had to jump up, like... So I said, okay, instead of just taking all of these really carefully, I'm going to just drop down to the bottom and jump up the way through them.
Right.
It was a different way to play through the stage than I played through it the first time.
Right, yeah. It adds a little degree of complexity and just fun. It's a fun game, ultimately.
Yeah, this is one... A lot of these games are arcadian feel, and they're things that I don't necessarily feel the need to beat.
Right.
But this is one I actually want to go back and, the difficulty is satisfying.
Yes, it is. It ramps. There's a well-designed game, actually.
Yeah.
Considering... within the confines of the Speccy jam, it's awesome. It looks great, and it's playable, man. That's the thing. It takes the modern sensibility of ramping up, having a sophisticated sort of changing of the platforms, and
I think that kind of out of everything we've played, this probably does the best at taking the ZX Spectrum aesthetic and sort of play style, but it makes it feel a bit more modern. Because a lot of the other stuff we played, while good, is pretty staunchly, retro.
Right.
In how it plays and how it feels. And this feels very, very modern. So if you're kind of on the fence about any of these, and you're like, oh, I don't really know if I want to try any of that ZX Spectrum stuff.
Sure.
That seems suspicious.
Right, archaic.
This one is definitely not. And I would highly recommend checking this out. It's one of my favorite games that I played in this.
Absolutely, yeah. Bug-eyed blob things, it's definitely worth playing.